The park had just received its most recent new inhabitant in the form of the Drysaurus. These little critters were not necessarily a crowd pleaser, but after a small hiatus of no new dinosaurs being added, they were a pleasant addition for sure. The park by now had their fair share of cute dinosaurs that were popular amongst the younger crowd. The pens around the Drysaurus area were still empty, meaning they did not sense any potential predators lurking. But soon, some carnivores would be added in the vicinity. But for now, the park just dribbled on like it used to. It was peaceful and calm. Roars and other sounds could be heard, but none of them were meant as a threat. The Concavenator pen had a bit of a goat problem, which needed to be fixed, but other than that, it was all fine. When the creatures arrived at their new pen, there would usually be an overload of new senses and smells that they would have to get used to. But by now, their pens had become their only known reality that they could remember, and they seemed calmer than ever before. They felt at home in their small territories, most intermingling with their own species, while the mixed pens still flourished with life of all kinds as well. There were also multiple star attractions. It wasn't like one particular dinosaur or creature adhered all the attention to itself. Whether it was the mystical Yanchronosaurus, the giant Apatosaurus, or the majestic mammoths, every zone had something new and wondrous to behold. But then it was time to introduce the park to something new and special. A new giant carnivore. And this time, it would be a huge crowd puller. The Spinosaurus would be introduced to the park. But this triple star attraction had been popular in the previous zones and safari parks as well. Just like with the Apatosaurus, the scientists and money holders wanted to adjust the physicality of this dinosaur to make it more unique. But this time, the scientists received carte blanche, and the reactions and the results were very mixed.
What is that? What the f*** is that?
The scientists let themselves go a little bit too far. Multiple groups that were led by different people had created and mixed multiple DNA strands to create all sorts of abominations. The one even more frightening than the other. Most of these were not approved, since they needed to be somewhat scary, but not induce psychedelic nightmares or trauma. There was one team that had mixed killer whale DNA with a Spinosaurus. In the end, these monster hybrids were all put to the side and maybe added later in a different pen or whenever they would make a dinosaur circus. Eventually the team went back to the drawing board and created a Spinosaurus that was closer to the actual dinosaur according to found fossils compared to the one shown in Jurassic Park 3. The fin on the back had a bit of a different size and shape due to the bones sticking out more towards the hip area. For this zone, 2 Spinos would be unleashed. They were by far the most lethal predator in the park yet, and thus it was important to keep these two calm at all costs. For a predator that was so capable of killing, they had a weirdly very calm demeanor about them. None of the Spinos showed interest in the rangers or jeeps when they arrived to sedate them. It was quite peculiar, but the rangers by all likeliness did a little thank you prayer after that ordeal was over. The Spinos were transported during the day, as the arrival of these predators was again big news for the presses. Once they arrived, they were craving some water and food. The diet of a Spino would consist of both meat and fish. Their fin would help them swim through swampy territories and rivers at a quick pace to either capture a fleeing land victim or capture a significant amount of fish. A lot of fish were required to satisfy the Spino's hunger, let alone 2, and so a lot of it would be imported to the park area, especially since upcoming dinosaurs would follow a similar diet. These 2 Spinos seemed to get along rather well, and were not stressed in any way. This boded well to where they could live happily in their pen. The zone that was reserved for them was very large, so they did not have the slightest feeling of being in a claustrophobic area. But then it was time for another dinosaur, and this time it would be another predator, but one that was far smaller than the Spinosaurus. Since the import of fish had risen substantially, it made sense to quickly have another dinosaur with similar culinary interests join the park's rankings. The next dinosaur would also live in a similar swamp-style pen, making it logical to also put this new creature right next to the Spinos from an aesthetic perspective. The fish had already been imported and placed, ready to be eaten. The zone was significantly smaller, but would still house 2 guests, and the newest additions to the park would be the Baryonyx.